directed by Christopher McQuarrie. We're talking Rogue Nation, Fallout, Dead Reckoning Part 1.
And even looking a bit ahead, some connections into the final reckoning. These films are just packed with unbelievable stunts, cool spy tech, and loads of behind-the-scenes stuff.
Absolutely. They're kind of a masterclass in modern action filmmaking, aren't they? And we've gathered some really fascinating insights.
Yeah, hopefully you'll have a few aha moments listening. So, where should we start? Maybe with Rogue Nation from 2015?
Sounds good. One thing that always stands out about Rogue Nation is that commitment to practical effects, even from the get-go.
Right, like I heard they actually started filming some of the big action sequences before the script was even completely finished. That seems risky.
It does, yeah. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But when you've got Tom Cruise insisting on doing these massive, complex stunts himself, well, those things take ages to plan and rig safely.
Oh, okay. So starting early on, the action gave them breathing room, essentially.
Exactly. It meant the stunt team could get cracking without holding up the rest of production later on.
Yeah.
It shows, a lot of trust and planning went into those core ideas, even without every line of dialogue locked.
And that insistence from Cruise on doing the stunts himself, it's just such a defining part of these movies.
It really is.
Yeah.
And in Rogue Nation, you see them figuring out how to, showcase that incredible commitment, but also keep them in one piece.
It's a balance. And the locations in Rogue Nation were amazing, too. Really gave it that global spy feel. US, UK, Morocco, Austria.
Definitely adds to the scale. And visually, they made some interesting choices, too, didn't they? With the lenses.
Yeah, that's fascinating. They used older Panavision C-series anamorphic lenses. Why go for older tech like that?
Well, the cinematographer, Robert Elswit and McQuarrie, wanted a specific, classic movie look. Those older lenses, they have character.
Character? How so?
They're maybe a bit softer. The flares are different. It gives a distinct texture you don't always get with modern super sharp lenses. Plus, they were smaller, lighter. Good for handheld stuff.
Makes sense. But tricky to work with.
Oh, yeah. Because they were basically hand-assembled back in the day, each one is slightly unique. So matching shots between different cameras could be a real headache for the crew.
Okay, let's talk about that underwater vault scene. That was just intense.
Incredible sequence. Again, a huge practical undertaking. They built this massive cylindrical set inside a water tank at Leavesden.
But not the whole thing was real, right?
No, exactly. The parts Ethan actually touches or interacts with, those were practical set pieces. But the wider environment, the sense of scale, that was largely green screen filled in later.
And Cruise held his breath for that the whole time.
Well, not in one continuous go, though it looks like it. He insisted on doing the breath holding himself, absolutely. But they filmed it in chunks, with breaks, edited together seamlessly. He couldn't have any metal, so no oxygen tank.
Still, that's insane commitment. How long could he actually hold his breath? I read some crazy numbers.
The training was reportedly intense. Both he and Rebecca Ferguson apparently got up to around 6.5 minutes in training. The key was achieving this, Zen state on set to keep heart rates super low.
Wow. And how did they make them look like they were actually swimming through that huge space? I heard something about transferred motion.
Yeah, that's a clever technique. It's kind of like how they filmed miniatures in old sci-fi, like Star Wars, instead of always moving the actors through the water, which is hard to control precisely.
They moved the camera around the actors?
Exactly. They'd keep Cruise and Ferguson relatively stationary for certain shots and use this specialized underwater camera rig, like a remote-controlled robotic arm, on a track system to create that fluid sense of movement. Gave them much more control over the framing.
And the lighting in there must have been complex. Underwater LEDs.
Yeah, integrated right into the practical parts of the set. Controlled very precisely to give it that moody, atmospheric look without, making it feel brightly lit, which wouldn't fit the scene. They even used some prototype RE-LED tubes to add subtle light shifts, enhancing that feeling of water movement.
It all sounds incredibly technical. I also heard the overall lighting approach for the film was kind of described as Tom Cruise dependent. What does that mean?
Well, it sort of means that while they embraced natural light in places like Casablanca, giving it a distinct, contrasty feel, a key priority was always making sure the star looked heroic and, good, even in the middle of chaos.
Makes sense. You want your hero to look like a hero.
Pretty much. But that combination of low light, those anamorphic lenses with their shallow focus, and a constantly moving camera, imagine being the focus puller on that film.
Oh man, nightmare fuel. That shallow depth of field means if you're off by an inch.
The shot's ruined.
Yeah.
First AC, Eric Brown apparently relied heavily on a remote focus system. You couldn't physically be pulling focus on the lens barrel in many of those dynamic shots.
And speaking of dynamic, the Airbus A400M stunt. Just how?
Pure insanity, wasn't it? They built this special rig to mount a camera outside the plane, extending through porthole windows. Cruise was harnessed securely, obviously, but hanging onto the side of a military transport plane as it takes off.
It's still hanging onto the side of a plane.
Right. The coordination between Cruise, the stunt team, the pilot, the camera crew, absolutely immense. They needed to make sure you, the audience, knew it was really him.
And he even got hurt doing the motorcycle chase, right? Scraped his knee pretty badly.
Yeah, there's a visible moment where he hits the tarmac because he wasn't wearing the proper protective knee sliders for that specific take. Just shows the risks involved, even with all the planning.
That commitment is unreal. And the driving, apparently Rogue Nation, was where his skills really leveled up.
According to stunt coordinator Wade Eastwood, yes. They did rigorous training for all the car and bike chases. Getting those drifts and slides consistent and precise took a lot of work.
Which paid off in Fallout, presumably. Speaking of which, it's funny how they had to source those classic BMW E28s themselves for the Paris chase.
Yeah, even though BMW was involved with product placement, they didn't just have a fleet of pristine E28s lying around. The production had to track them down from owners.
And some owners weren't keen to sell, knowing their classic car might get smashed up.
Understandably. It's an iconic car. People get attached.
So moving on to Fallout in 2018, that E28 choice wasn't just random then.
No, not at all. It came from a genuine appreciation for the car. Production designer Peter Wenham liked classics, and Wade Eastwood, the stunt coordinator, actually had fond memories of the E28 M5 from his childhood in South Africa.
That's cool. So they found, what, 5 or 6 of them and modified them?
Around that number, yeah. They did some mod suspension tweaks on one for that jump down the stairs to stop it rolling. They even modified another one specifically to test how it would roll. Tighter handbrakes, different tires, but otherwise surprisingly stock in many ways.
And Cruise, coming off Rogue Nation, was already a pro driver by then.
Pretty much. Eastwood said he adapted really quickly to the E28's handling, which is quite different from the modern M3 he drove in Rogue Nation.
Yeah.
The skills were already there.
Which you can see in that insane Arc de Triomphe sequence. How did they even film that?
Utter chaos. Coordinated brilliantly. They got permission to film around the Arc for just 1 hour, very early one morning.
1 hour?
Yep. Eastwood brought in about 70 drivers, mostly professional racing and stunt drivers he knew personally. They formed these 3 concentric circles of cars, constantly moving, reacting to crews weaving through them on the motorbike. Precision driving on a massive scale.
Mind-boggling. And then there's the halo jump. The commitment to practical there was just off the charts.
Totally. Seeing the raw footage, you realize a cameraman literally jumped out of the plane with Cruise to get those shots.
Wearing a camera on his helmet.
Yeah, a specialized rig. And they often had 2 cameras rolling, one capturing the shot for the movie,
Yeah.
another filming the behind the scenes of how they were getting the shot. It really emphasizes the practical effort.
Even the cockpit scenes, they weren't faking the G-forces and stuff.
Well, the actors weren't actually flying the helicopters in some of the most dangerous shots, obviously, but they were often in real cockpits, sometimes mounted on gimbals or even in transit, experiencing the real physical sensations. It adds that layer of authentic reaction.
You can feel it. Okay, jumping ahead to Dead Reckoning Part 1, 2023. I read something fascinating about McQuarrie basically recutting the film after getting some brutally honest feedback.
Yeah, it was apparently an email from a friend of the editor, Eddie Hamilton, after a test screening. Very critical, but McQuarrie said it was exactly the wake-up call he needed.
Really? What did they change?
It led to removing some scenes, reportedly including ones involving the character Marie, that were just slowing things down or not quite landing. It shows they're willing to make tough calls late in the game based on honest feedback. That email sender even got a special thanks credit.
That's amazing. And Cruise had a strong opinion on where the opening title should go, like really late.
28 minutes in, after the scene with Kittredge. McQuarrie was skeptical at first, apparently, but Cruise felt it was the right vibe, the right moment to hit the audience with the theme tune and titles, like sending them into the credits with a win after that intense setup.
Interesting choice, and despite being Part 1, they consciously avoided a massive, unsatisfying cliffhanger.
Very much so. Cruise was apparently adamant about it. The film needed its own sense of completion. So the reveal that Ethan has the key at the end that provides closure for this installment while clearly setting up the stakes for the next one. You know what the goal is now.
Smart. And the locations, again, Norway looks stunning for that train sequence and the motorcycle cliff jump.
Absolutely breathtaking. places like Anodolostnes and Helsinkopen. Though, interestingly, while they filmed a lot practically with a real train and replica Orient Express carriages,
There was a lot of digital work, too.
a significant amount. The shoot took a long time, seasons changed, so the locomotive itself was often digitally replaced, and the surrounding environment was heavily augmented or entirely CG in many shots to maintain continuity and, frankly, make the Alps look even more dramatic.
Right. How about the fight on the train? That looked incredibly dangerous.
It was filmed on a moving train set, yes, but the speed was often manipulated, sometimes faster, sometimes slower than reality. An extensive background replacement was needed. Plus, lots of added smoke and steam. Almost every shot had digital smoke added to help blend things, hide rigs, and control the perceived speed.
And the bridge blowing up, the train going over, that wasn't a real bridge, was it?
The inspiration was the Killing Bridge in Norway. But the one in the film is a CG creation, made much, much higher for more drama. They built the digital bridge with a realistic internal structure, filled with digital ballast, so the destruction simulation looked convincing when it crumbled.
Wow. And the train itself going over?
That involved some practical elements filmed in the UK. They did crash a real locomotive in a quarry, but the final sequence uses a fully CG locomotive for many shots, especially to remove rigs from the practical footage, composited into a completely CG alpine valley and river.
Even the carriages dangling precariously. How did they do that?
They built partial carriage sets on gimbals at Longcross Studios, which could tilt and shake realistically for the interior shots that inchworming effect. But again, those practical sets were often digitally replaced with highly detailed CG versions, especially for wider shots or complex camera moves. The animation of how they buckled and scraped against the crumbling bridge was key to selling it.
It's funny, though, even with all that effort, some little goofs slip through, like the steam train apparently running without coal.
Yeah, or the whistle still blowing after the controls are smashed. It happens. Even on these massive productions, tiny continuity things can get missed. Adds a bit of charm, maybe.
Maybe. So finally, let's touch on Mission: Impossible: A Final Reckoning, which is technically the 8th film, even if the title changed. There are some deep connections back to earlier movies.
Oh yeah, they're really tying things together. Apparently, Ethan's whole quest for the rabbit's foot back in Mission: Impossible Third is revealed to have directly led to the creation of the entity.
No way.
How? The idea is that the pursuit of that object, which Ethan himself called the anti-god, set certain things in motion. That concept of a dangerous, godlike power returns with the entity, tying Ethan's past directly to this ultimate threat.
That adds so much weight. And Gabriel, the villain, uses Ethan's past against him.
Exactly. He taunts Ethan by referencing Owen Davian kidnapping Julia in MI.3, trying a similar psychological tactic by threatening Grace. It shows the villains are aware of Ethan's history and pressure points.
And some familiar faces are back, like William Donlow from the very first film.
The CIA analyst Ethan embarrassed during the Langley heist. Yeah, he reportedly returns in a more significant role. A real deep cut for longtime fans.
But the biggest reveal sounds like Shea Wingham's character, Jasper Briggs. He's Jim Phelps' son.
That's the rumor, yeah. A huge twist that completely reframes his conflict with Ethan. It suddenly becomes deeply personal, rooted in the fallout from the very first movie. Explains why Briggs might have been so eager to go after Hunt initially.
Wow. Okay. That changes everything. And the filming locations are globetrotting as usual. UK, Norway, South Africa, Malta, Italy, even an aircraft carrier.
They certainly didn't skimp on the travel budget. Lake District, Svalbard, Blyde River Canyon, Valletta, using diverse landscapes for everything from car chases to Arctic sequences to submarine recovery scenes filmed off the USS George H.W. Bush.
Incredible scale. It had a massive opening weekend, didn't it? Biggest ever for the franchise.
It did, yeah. Something like $63 million domestically, $190 million worldwide in its first few days. But
the budget was huge.
Reportedly around $400 million, partly due to all the pandemic delays and costs. So even with a big opening, making a profit is a serious challenge. It highlights the massive risks of blockbuster filmmaking today.
Definitely. I love the little Easter egg, too, the date President Sloan sends, May 22, 1996.
The release date of the original Mission. Impossible film. A nice nod.
And it's crazy that only Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames have been in every single film.
8 films. It's incredible consistency and speaks volumes about their importance to the franchise's identity. Luther Stickle and Ethan Hunt constants across nearly 3 decades.
And this final part, The Final Reckoning, it's still a direct sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1, even though they dropped the Part 2 subtitle.
Yep, absolutely. A direct continuation. Production got interrupted, schedules shifted, but it picks up the story. And it's expected out relatively soon, before Cruise turns 63, I believe.
Well, that was quite the mission through the making of these incredible films. So much goes into them.
The dedication, especially to the practical stunts, is just phenomenal. And discovering those connections across the series adds another layer entirely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Mission Impossible. We hope you found all that behind-the-scenes info as fascinating as we did.
From Cruise's wild stunts to the intricate filmmaking choices, there's always something new to appreciate.
If you enjoyed the episode, please do subscribe, maybe leave a review, or share it with anyone else who loves these movies.
It really helps others find the show.
Until next time, this podcast will not self-destruct.